Any advice and information from this podcast is general only. It has been prepared without taking into account your individual circumstances and needs. Before acting on any advice from this podcast, you should assess and seek advice on whether it is appropriate for your needs, financial situation, and investment objectives. Hello everyone. Welcome to myself, Yannick, and the famous Jessie McCormack, or J-Mac as people know her. Jessie, hello.
Hi, Yannick.
With all the finance questions or the finance-related questions that we come about, we've sort of summed those up into some main points that we believe people really want to get to know or sort of learn a bit more about. So for our first 5-part series of the podcast journey, our first one will be on, Jessie, do you want to intro it or myself?
House purchasing. So purchasing your first house.
Good God, that sounds very exciting. I'm excited already. I remember the dizzy days when I had to, when we were looking at buying our first house. But yes, some of the main questions we get from people or clients or whatever is how do I go about buying my first house?
Yeah.
It's such a big and daunting thing out there, whether you live in Townsville, in the southern states, the capital cities, whether you're spending $200,000 or you're spending $700,000 on your first home. People from all walks of life and careers and professions have very similar questions when it comes to buying your first home. So we wanted to cover the five main parts of this and help people along the journey.
So one of my first questions to you, Yannick, is can I afford a house?
That's a really tough question, Jessie. I'd have to dig into your financials and how much you spend on your shoes and your holidays. That's a really good question, Jessie. Look, there's a lot of factors in that, but we'll sort of keep it quite general. What we're finding with a lot of people, they ask that question. For a lot of banks, not that we're mortgage brokers, but I guess the key number is sort of that 20%. And how do I sort of get to that 20%, which gets me out of LMI, or Lender's Mortgage Insurance, which we'll cover a little bit later on. So let's just say a young couple are looking to buy a house. They found their great first home. It's around $400,000. 20% of that is about $80,000. By no means is that an easy thing to save for. So how are you going to put the steps in place to try and get to that $80,000 to put a deposit on that house? By all means, you can buy a house for less than 20%, but by having that deposit gives you a bit more negotiation power with the bank, and it also pretty much gets you out of paying any lender's mortgage insurance.
Even saving for a deposit is one thing. Even, if I'm a 25 to 30-year-old, will the bank give me a loan? If I go see a mortgage broker, will they give me a loan? How does that process kind of work?
Really good question. Look, what we try and find with first home buyers, one of the first up questions we might ask, Jessie, I'm going to ask this to you as well as a personal level. Do you have a budget in place, Jessie?
Let's say as a 25-year-old, which I am not, I do.
We can't disclose Jessie's age. Okay. Look, getting down to it, some people that we've met have a budget and some don't. It works for some and it doesn't work for others. What we're trying to get at with the budget is it lets you sort of map out whether you draw it on a pen and paper or use an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or something that's visual for yourself, that it lets yourself and maybe your partner sit down and go, hey, this is the money that's coming in and this is the money that's going out. And a budget lets you sort of outline that in a bit more detail, whether you've got kids, whether you're the rent you're paying. It lets you sort of itemize each item and put a dollar figure next to it. Because what we find with a lot of people that have a bit of a loose budget, they might have, say, $100 coming in, and they're like, sweet, I should be able to save $50 a week for a year. That should be around $2,500 a year as an example. But when they get to the end of the year, they're like, okay, awesome, I've got enough for a deposit, but how come I've only got $500 in my bank account? The question I guess we sort of look to ask is, well, are there things in your budget you're not accounting for, like when you go out and you grab a coffee, or the extra fuel you put in your car, or that extra bit of clothing, or that music festival that you sort of went to? All these things add up over whether it's 6 months or 12 months. They all add up to a spending that I guess is taking away from that saving amount that you're looking at. So with a budget, it could seem daunting, and yes, you might need to sit down with your partner and sort of discuss a few things on your spending habits, but we have found a lot more people are benefiting from a budget that it lets you outline all your costs. That includes everything from hair and beauty, how much you're spending on electricity, rent, contents insurance if you don't have a house, everything to do with your vehicle. If you can list that down and sort of track it, you might only spend maybe 10, 20 minutes a month or during the year. That lets you then sort of pave a little pathway to getting an end result towards saving your deposit. So that's sort of the first ticket item there ticked off, the budget.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I guess if you do see a bank or, make it a bit easier on yourself and see a mortgage broker who can talk to all the banks for you without having to redo, the loan application to all the different banks, what they're kind of looking at is your serviceability as well. So, if you have an income of, say you're a couple and you have an income of 100,000, they kind of look at your HEM, they call it, which is kind of what your basic living expenses would be. I think at the moment for a couple in Queensland with no kids, it's about 60,000. So they'd kind of say you'd have about 40,000 spare, which you could use to pay off mortgage repayments. So then if, your mortgage repayments are less than 40,000, they might say, yeah, you're good to go. So just a kind of a bit of a basic calc you can do as well.
So you've managed to maybe just negotiate with your better half. You've had to cut back on your spending. Maybe so your better half has, or it could be yourself as well. You've found out the money that's coming in and you've seen that on your budget, and now you've sort of written down or itemised the money that has to go out. You've got to pay for fuel. Look, you've got to buy food. You've got to pay rent. You've got to pay bills. We understand that. Once it's in your budget, you can see that, hey, you've got X amount left over or a surplus amount. That's your spare savings money that you can either allocate for long-term savings or in the purposes of buying your first home. This is the dollars and cents that are going to go towards your first home deposit. So once that's in place, you sort of know the goal where you need to get. If it outlines that, hey, at the end of the year, you should have $10,000 or $20,000, by all means, that gives you a goal week to week, month to month to sort of track towards. And fingers crossed, and by making a bit of your own luck, you should be able to get there in achieving that surplus amount. And that is building towards your deposit of your house.
So what if I want to fast track my buying experience and say on that $400,000 property, that 20% deposit is $80,000. What if I don't have that right now? That I think there's other schemes that I could possibly use.
Get in line, Jessie, because like a lot of people have asked, we know that, as you just outlined, a $400,000 property, to hit that magic number of 20%, you're looking at saving about $80,000, which by no means is an easy feat, whether you're a medium to high income earner, single or as a couple. That's a challenge in itself, especially for whether you're 25 or 30 years old. So you did mention there were some schemes and incentives that are there to help you sort of purchase that property by possibly having a smaller deposit. Okay, not to get sort of too far into it, the government, I guess, has wanted people to be able to access or finance buying their first home. So they've brought out some schemes and incentives or government grants that lets you sort of get into the market by utilising, I guess you could call it sort of government incentives. Look, the first one we can sort of cover if you want is the First Home Ownership Super Savings Scheme. Jessie, do you care to shed light on that or...?
Yeah, so this is a great scheme available to anyone really, and it allows you to put money into your super up to $15,000 a year, and you can do that each year until you get to about $50,000. And once you're ready to purchase your home, you can withdraw those funds from your super. So it can be a great savings mechanism for a lot of people.
That sounds pretty good, but why Why super? Why is it so good? Why put money in super? I thought you could only access that at 60 or whatever the government says.
No, this is actually a great scheme where you can access it once you've kind of found a house you like and signed a contract. There are some disadvantages in that, you know, your money's locked away. If you don't end up buying a house, it's in there forever, or till 60, which feels like forever as a 25-year-old.
Yeah, tell me about it. That was a wee while ago that I was 25. But anyway, back onto the finance side.
But yeah, it can be a great scheme, especially if you kind of like your money locked away. Then you can kind of take that 50,000 out. There's I believe a 30% offset on tax to kind of take that out from your marginal tax rate, with some kind of deeming as well. So it can be quite advantageous. Well, that's my big word for today.
Oh my God, my brain's hurting already.
But it can be a great scheme dependent on your situation, obviously.
So in a nutshell, the FHSSS, did I get that many S's right?
Well done.
Good God. There's 10 years uni there. So the first home ownership super savings scheme, it's essentially letting you put more money into super, and it's giving you a bit of a tax kick. So you're able to make... So with that, once the money goes in, let's just say the funds, it earns a little bit of money. It's only paying 15%. Is that correct?
Yes.
Cool. So like, I guess what we talked about before with the surplus amount in your budget, let's just say you put that into a savings account. I don't know, there's a few savings accounts out there that are making 5%. I guess if I have that money in there, let's just say I saved up $50,000 and I'm ticking along. I guess that savings account, I'm going to pay like normal tax on that, aren't I?
Yeah, your marginal tax rate, any interest you make, yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm pretty sure I know this, but I had to double check with Jessie. That's why she's the ninja and I'm on the keyboard pushing the buttons.
No.
But yeah, okay, it sounds pretty awesome, and it's only been around sort of a handful of years, as we mentioned, for the government to sort of help people boost their savings a little bit by giving them just a little bit of an extra tax ride, and they can put that and utilise the FHSSS, or the First Home Ownership Super Savings Scheme.
So there's, I guess, other schemes available to kind of reduce your deposit as well. There's the First Home Guarantee Scheme.
Yep.
Could you tell us a bit about that one?
First Home Guarantee. It sounds, I don't know, that sounds like a crazy acronym. Should I know about this? No, I do. Look, we've got a pretty good understanding on it. Look, as we mentioned before with the First Home Ownership Super Savings Scheme, the government's also sort of released or through Housing Australia has released another incentive. We talked about the magic number for a home deposit being about 20%. The government knows that is very hard to save for. Let's just say if you live in around the main city areas, $400,000 for a first home or unit is not going to cut it. We're sort of looking at the perspective of Townsville. By all means, though, if you have a look at the median or average house prices of Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, you're going to need more than 400,000 bickies to sort of get into your first home, unless you want to live halfway to, I don't know, we're middle of Australia. No, not quite that far. So the government now is helping people, whether you're an individual, you've got to be over 18, or a couple. They will help you or waive the lender's mortgage insurance if you only have up to 5% of your deposit. The minimum you have to access this scheme is 5%. So, quick math, I want to buy a $400,000 property. 5% of that is $20,000. You've got that $20,000 deposit. You can apply for this scheme, and what will then happen is the government will then pay for or waive the other expense, which is lender's mortgage insurance. Because if you went to a bank and applied and they approved you of a loan and you only had a 5% deposit, you would pay a few thousand as a general number in lender's mortgage insurance, which we will cover in a second. So, for a individual earning up to $125,000 or a couple earning up to $200,000, as shown on their previous financial year notice of assessment, that will enable them to be waived the remainder of the LMI that you're liable to pay. That then helps you, I suppose, lighten the load on your total loan bill when you apply for a home loan. Because sometimes, essentially, what will happen if, let's just say, the bank approves you for 10%, you've only got 10% deposit, you've paid $40,000 on a $400,000 property. The LMI they charge you to get you to 20% essentially just goes on top of your loan. Is that right, Jessie? Is that what happened to you because you spent all your money on your... No, don't answer that question. Yeah, so it's helping, whether they're young Australians or first homeowners or first home buyers, get into the market by sort of saving a few $1,000s and getting around that lender's mortgage insurance. The government's picking up that bill, which is a great incentive. Now, since Jessie's got she's definitely got the bigger bag of tricks than I do. I know she's screaming to sort of mention there's also another incentive for sort of healthcare professionals that the government also incentivises. Which one's that one? Yeah,
so you can get your deposit for 10% with no LMI if you're in the healthcare sector.
What do you mean healthcare sector? Is that...
If you're a nurse, doctor, anyone working at, a hospital type of thing. See your bank or mortgage broker disclaimer.
When I was applying for my degree, they were after me to become a doctor, but I should have been maybe just for that incentive. That's unreal. So, yeah, on the other side of it, for like those healthcare professionals, as you just mentioned, they can sort of tap into some additional incentives as well that's provided by the government.
Yeah, for sure.
So they should too, because it's definitely not the easiest of jobs or the industry.
Yeah.
That's great.
Just to add on to what you were saying, just if you do go for that 5% first home guarantee scheme, just of note that you will have a bigger loan because you've got less of a deposit. So your repayments would be higher than if you'd paid that 20% deposit. So just something to think of when you're kind of setting yourself up, figuring out your first home. And, on top of that, the ongoing expenses like your rates, insurance.
You're scaring me, but that's or you're scaring everyone else. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, you're right. I guess I sort of got caught up in the incentive, the fact that I could save if I only had 5% deposit. The government would sort of pay for the rest of my LMI. But yeah, what people fail to remember, and I guess you've outlined it. Of course, you would. Skills from the JMac is someone if you've only got a 5% deposit on a $400,000 property, you are still going to have to pay back 95% of that property.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. But look, it's not all doom and gloom. It's letting you sort of get into the property market at maybe an earlier time. Look, for yourself, it could be yourself you could be on an income that easily facilitates that loan, or you could be in a couple with no kids. I'd hate to think how much spare money a couple with no kids has. Jesse, you want to shed light on that, or is that a story for another time?
Yannick's always given me about dink life. I'll insert swear word. He's always given me stuff about dink life. So
no, it's look, yeah, understand the grant's there, but as Jesse said, whether you borrow if it's 5% or 10%, you're still having to pay back a big chunk of that mortgage. So if you come up with the 20%, or even if you come up with a 30% deposit, you're going to have a smaller loan. But it's just something to be cognizant of. Well, that about wraps up what we've covered pretty much for topic 1, part 1. Thank you for listening to our initial podcast, one of many, as we mentioned. So just to sort of highlight what we talked about, it was mainly about buying your first home or your first home purchase, discussion points around deposit amounts, working through a budget and seeing how that helps you to try and build that savings amount and cash flow to get to your deposit. A little bit about brokers and banks, and some of the great incentives that the government provides regarding first homeowners super saver scheme, or if you don't have the 20% to get out of your lender's mortgage insurance, etc. Look forward to hopefully seeing you, or you hearing our voices, on topic 1, part 2. We'll see you then.
Bye, guys.